For this tutorial, I'm using Blender version 3.4. Hi, my name is Guy, Mystery Guy. This tutorial is all about lights. I'll be examining the different types, the point, the sun, the spot. We've used spot in every tutorial so far, the area, the mesh emission. We used that in tutorial 4 with the spheres and the light beams. And we're going to go to the world and add a sky texture to give a sky to the background of our animations. I'm going to show you how to use God rays, another name for volumetric lighting, and we're going to use IES lights. I'll be talking about hard and soft shadows. We'll be switching render engines to cycles, folks, to get high quality output. I'll be talking about using render slots where we can compare the rendered output of making changes in an animation to show a before and after. We're going to add a constraint, track 2, and to make our work easier, we're going to enable auto keyframes. Here's an example of using a point type. This is the sun type. This is the spot. We've used that a lot. This is the area. This is mesh emission. That's that cone. And finally, the world sky texture to add a sky to the background. In this example, God rays are the two lights coming in from the top where you can actually see the beams of light. IES lights. When we get to this part of the tutorial, you are going to have 250,000 different lights to choose from. Are you ready? I am too. This is the scene I set up for my experiments with the lights. I've got one actor front and center and 5 duplicates behind. When I'm changing the lights, I want to look at the highlights and the shadows to see what effect the light has. For example, this actor in the center, look at his head. It's very bright. The other heads are dimmer, they're grayer. And this fella way over on the back right, his head's in shadow. To fix that shadow problem, I would take the light and either rotate it to include him or make it bigger to include him. That's why I made this scene the way I did. I'm going to scale the default cube by 0.3 in X and 0.3 in Y. That's the body of our actor. I'm going to add mesh UV sphere, scale type S 0.3. The Z location is 1.3. I'm going to right click and shade smooth. That's our actor. Let me click on the body and add some materials. Material, I'm going to call it body. And for the base color, pick a color you want. I'm going to go with a blue. Click on the sphere, that's the head. A new material, call it head. And I'm going to leave it just like that for now. I'm going to make duplicates of this character, 5 of them back here. To make that easier for me, I'm going to join them into one mesh. Click the body, click the head, go up to Object, and there's Join. I'm going to rename that sphere now to Actor. Now I'm going to duplicate it. Shift D, right click so I'll keep it in place. I'm going to the object properties. The location for the first duplicate is -4 and -1.5. The next duplicates, Shift D, press Y, 1.5, enter. Shift D, Y, 1.5, enter. Shift D, Y, 1.5, enter. One more, Shift D, Y 1.5, enter. There's our actors on the stage. Press 0 on the numpad for camera view. I'm going to make a few adjustments to that camera, so click on camera, and for the X rotation, click on it, drag it a bit to the right, just to move the frame up a bit. The Z rotation, drag that to the right, just so everything's nicely centered. Now, let's go up to Add, Mesh, Plane. This is our floor. Type S, 30, and for the Z location, enter -1. I'm going to click on the light, and the light data properties. Just to remind you, we've got 4 types: the point, the sun, the spot, and the area. What I'm going to do is to duplicate that light, 1 for each type of light. I'm going to rename them so they match the types, and I'm going to type a number before the type so I can keep them in the proper order. This one I'm going to name 2 sun. That was the next one. Area. So now I have them in order. Let's set them up. So light 1, that's a point. Light 2, click on sun. Light 3, that's a spot. And light 4, that's an area. Good. Now, let me turn off the visibility of 2, 3, and 4 and turn off the rendering so I can talk just about the point light. Go up to the top right, switch to rendered view. There you go. That is one light. That's the point light. Now let's talk about that. I'd like to make the heads of these actors more reflective. Let me click on one and go to Materials Properties. And with the head selected, I'm going to change metallic from 0 to 0.7 and the roughness from 0.5 to 0.2. Yeah, I can see I've got some reflections on the heads now. Let me go back and select the light. The color, if I click on that color bar, I can pick any color I want for that light. To reset the color, drag those sliders all the way to the right. The power affects the brightness. Let me try 5,000. Nice and bright. Let me try 300. Much dimmer. I'll go back to 1,000 where we started. You can drag the diffuse, specular, and volume sliders to see what effect it has on your scene. The radius affects the sharpness of the shadow. Let me go to top view. And the radius, I'm going to drag that to the right. And watch that light. There's a little circle on the outline of it. There it is. I'm changing the size. And now look how soft those shadows are. That's what the radius is used for. I'm going to go back to 0.1 and camera view. Let me click on object properties. I want you to watch these coordinates. I'm going to type G for grab and move that light down. This allows you to position the light where you want. And if you look on the right, when I'm moving it, all those numbers are changing. Back to object data properties. The last thing to point out is that shadow selection. You can turn that off and on. If that's off, you won't get shadows when you render your animation. Here's an example of just a point light. I started it in the very front, had it go around behind the other actors. Something I've been dying to show you. Go over to the right where that little camera is. That's the render properties. Click on that. The render engine, the default is EV. That's what we've been using to date. Sampling render, change 64 to 100. That'll give us a bit more quality. In the drop-down list, EV, select cycles. Under device, CPU, click that. If you have GPU compute available, you will always choose that. It'll make your rendering much, much faster. Viewport max samples, change that to 100. And render max samples, change that to 100. Now that's the same as EV, which we can use for comparing. So here's an EV render on the screen. To compare the two, EV and cycles, go up to render on the left and render image. This is a single image from our animation, and it took EV 0.39 seconds to generate this image. We're going to compare that with a cycles render, where it says slot 1, click that and select slot 2. Go back to your main screen, change the render engine to cycles, go back to render and render image. Cycles is rendering now. Look at sample 2, 3, 4. When I was first introduced to cycles, I thought this is going to take forever. I'm just going to stick with EV. It's so much faster. That's true, but the quality of the two images varies drastically. It's going to be worth it. Cycles is done with its rendering. I'm going to switch back to slot 1 to see EV. That's what EV did. Look at the reflections in the head. Compare that with slot 2. Amazing difference. Cycles actually does reflections very nicely. Another thing with the EV, look at the shadow. They're pretty dark. Compare that with the cycles render. Shadows look more normal now, what you would expect to see in a scene. EV, cycles. So from this point on, I'm going to use cycles. That's what I use in all my work. It's worth the wait. Let's go to our next light, the sun. For the point light, I'm going to turn off visibility in the viewport, disable rendering, click on light 2, the sun, enable the viewport, turn on rendering. It's very bright. I'm going to turn the strength down to 1. The sun radiates in all directions, same as the point, but it illuminates everything in the scene. The sun is not used anymore. I'm not going to spend much more time on it. Here's a comparison of a point light and a sunlight. On the left, the point light, it radiates light in all directions, as does the sun. But if you look at the point light example, the background of it up near the top, that becomes a dark gray. That's the fall off. On the right, the sun illuminates everything and there is no fall off. I'm going to go to our next light on the list, spotlight. So I'll disable the sun from the viewport, disable rendering, click on light 3 spot, enable viewport, enable rendering. The first thing I notice is the actor in the back right. Their head is in shadow. To fix that, I'm going to click on Object Properties. The Z rotation, where it says 107, click on that, drag it to the left. There, now that head is in the light. I'll go back to Object Data Properties, click that little light bulb. The color, that's the color of the light, the power. The radius affects the size of the shadow right here by the actor in front. I'm going to increase the radius. See, that shadow's getting smaller. I can put that radius right down to 0. The spot size, I'm going to increase that. That's self-explanatory. Let me make it smaller. So now the spotlight is pretty much on the actor in the front center. The blend, I'm going to turn the radius all the way down to make this easier to see. That affects the blending of the outside shadow. Let me turn that up. See how soft that shadow is now? I'll turn it back down. If I turn it all the way down to 0, that's a perfectly hard edge to the spotlight. Let me go to top view. I'm going to press 7 on my numpad. And we'll look at these again. The radius, I'm going to increase that. You can see what effect that has on the scene. The spot size. And the blending. We can see that also. I'm going to switch back to camera view. Now, when I look at these 5 actors and the one in front, I picture this as a rock and roll concert. And there's the lead singer singing, "Goodbye, Ruby Tuesday." And these are the 5 backup singers. They're clapping and dancing, singing, "Bye-bye, bye-bye, so long, so long." Great fun. I want to set up the spotlights for the concert. I'm going to press 7 for top view, and I'm going to click on light 3, and I'd like it to be up in this area, aiming down here. I'm going to go to the object properties. Y is at 0.1. I'm going to type G, then Y, then move it up. Around 2, that's good enough. I want a second light down here coming in from a different angle. Let me set up these angles first. I'm going to type R, rotate till it goes right through the center. Type 1 for front view. That looks good. 3 for side view. 0 for camera view. That's nice. I'm going to go back to the object data properties and do some settings. I'm going to bring the radius right down to 0. The spot size, I'm going to lower that. That's about what I want. The blend, I'm going to increase that just a little. That's fine. Let me go back to top view. Now I'm going to duplicate that light. So that's at around 2 in the Y. I want the duplicate to be -2. So Shift D, Y. I'm going to lower that until it's around -2. Done. Let me rotate that. Type R for rotate. Get that line going through the center. Go back to camera view. And there's my 2 lights for the rock concert. How cool is that? I'm going to give you more practice with the spotlight by adding one more behind the backup singers, aimed right towards the lead singer. I'm going to press 7 on the numpad for top view, Shift D to duplicate, drag my mouse behind that middle singer. That's fine. I'm going to type R for rotate. Get it in position. I'm going to type 1 for front view, and then G and Z to drag it down to get the right height. R for rotate, so it's right at the back of the head. And 0 for camera view. Now let's go back to the object data properties and change some settings here. The radius is still at 0. I'm going to increase that a little bit. I can see some highlights appearing now. That's what I want. I'm going to go up to around 2. The spot size, I'm going to increase that. And you can see I'm getting more light coming in on the backup singers. I'm going to go all the way to around 70. And since this is a rock concert, let me change the color and make it red. Power, I'm going to go all the way to 10,000. There. That's exactly what I want. Make sure you keep these 3 spotlights. I'll be coming back to them later in this tutorial to show you something different. I'd like to show you something else. I'm going to turn off the visibility of those 2 lights, keep the main light on. Now, under the properties, see those little white circles? We've seen those before. Those are keyframes. Let me click on one. I just added a keyframe on frame 1 for a power of 1000. Let me go to the end of the timeline, type in 0, add a keyframe. I'll go back to the beginning. That's going to give me the ability to turn that light off slowly through the animation, like a fade to black. Second thing I'd like to show you, let me just change the scene a bit using my mouse wheel. I'm going to go down to the option Show Cone. That shows the extent of the spotlight. Let me turn on the other two. And Show Cone, spot 002, Show Cone. This lets you see where the light is actually landing for you to make any fine adjustments you'd like with the radius, spot size, or blend, whatever. That's a nice feature to have, is the Show Cone. I've switched back to camera view. Take a look at that spotlight. That's a circle. I'm going to show you area lights now where you can change the shape of the light. Let me disable the spotlights from the viewport rendering, enable the area light, click on it. It says area. An area light is going to give you softer shadows, and you may use it in a scene where you've got a television playing and you want light coming from the television into the living room. I'm going to go to top view now by pressing 7 to illustrate some of these features of an area. With the light selected, I'm going to type G to grab. I want to move it in front of that middle backup singer. I'm going to press 1 for front view, and then R to rotate it almost straight down, then 3 for right view, R for rotate again, get it straight down, and then with my mouse wheel pressed, I'm going to drag to get a different perspective of the scene. The type we have right now is a rectangle. The spread is 180. I'm going to change that to 40. And the size, look at the size, it's 0.1 and 0.1. I'm going to drag X to make it bigger, and in the center, we can see that rectangle changing its shape. There we go, that's a rectangle now. Almost the same, let me make it a little wider. Let's change to the square type. See what effect that has? And then disc, another name for a circle, and ellipse. I'm going to change the X measurement on that ellipse. So you have great flexibility. Let me go back to camera view, and let's look at the different effects these shapes have on the scene. That's the square, the rectangle, the disc, and finally the ellipse. So you have a great deal of flexibility in using an area light. And then I had an idea. Remember when we put that light behind the singers, that red light for a backlight? I wonder what that would look like if I used an area light to do the same thing. Let's find out. I'm going to go to top view, and I'm going to switch from ellipse to rectangular, back to object properties, reset the rotations. 0, 0, and Z will be 90. Type G for grab and move it to the left behind the singers. Press 1 for front view, and then G, Z to get it to the proper height. Type R, drag it to get the rotation I want. Then 0 for camera view. Now I see this dimension is a little too wide. That's more than what I want. I'll go back to object data properties and drag the Y down a bit. That's better. I'm going to go with that. The color, I'm going to make it a red again and use the same power I used on that spotlight, 5000. Let me turn the other spots on. So how does this image compare with the one that I did earlier with using a spotlight behind the singers? Take a look at the heads of the backup singers and the highlighted areas. On the image on the left, the area lamp, all of those highlights are pretty evenly distributed. On the right, using a spotlight, only the center singer has a lot of highlights. The ones at the extreme left and right barely have any at all. Next, look at the shoulder areas. On the left, for the area light, the shoulder areas are illuminated. On the spotlight on the right, the singer on the left doesn't have any. The one in the middle has illumination on the shoulder, and the same with the ones on the right. Finally, look at the lead singer. With the area light, there's a bit of red showing through on his shoulder. On the spotlight, that area is blue. None of the red light gets through. So I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but now you have a choice. The next type of light is the mesh emission. If I go up to add and then mesh, these are different kinds of meshes. Any one of these can be used to emit light. I'm going to choose the UV sphere. I'm going to type S to scale it, and then 0.2, then G to grab it, just so we can see what's going on with it. To make this emit light, I'll go to the Materials Properties, click New, and under Surface, click that and go up to Emission. I'm going to change the strength to 20. Let me turn the other lights off so we can see this better. I'm going to type G for grab, and you can see that UV sphere is emitting light. I want to show you something quickly. Shading, I'll hold Shift to drag these down. That's what the shading nodes look like. One emission going into the material output. But if I add anything on the left, all I can do is affect the color or the strength. There's a better way to do this. Let me go back to Layout. Under Material, I'm going to click the minus sign way over on the right. Add a new material. I'm going to call this Mesh. Now I'm going to scroll way down. There's Emission. Click on that black bar. Grab that little dot way up to the top. That's emitting now. The strength, I'm going to type 20, and that's exactly where I was before. But now if I go to shading, look at all these options I have on the left. Anything I add here now can affect all kinds of different properties of that light. Okay, back to layout. What I'd like to do is position this on the floor. I'll go to Object Properties. The Z-coordinate will be -1, half above, half below. I'm going to go to 7 for top view, grab, and put it between these two backup singers, just approximately. Shift D to copy it, Y to move it up in the Y-axis, Shift D, another duplicate, Y, Shift D, Y, so it's just between those backup singers. Back to camera view. There, see what I've done? Let me add the other lights back in. That spot, and the red from behind. So there's a nice example of using a mesh emission. I'm going to show you one more thing before I leave this topic. Let me go to Shading, click on Rendered View, and I'm going to add Input Wireframe. I'm going to connect factor to emission. Let me click on one. I'm going to press 0 on the numpad to zoom in on the selected object. And now I've got a wireframe. That's not as bright as the last one. I'm going to change the strength to 50. Go back to layout, camera view, camera view. One more thing I'd like to point out. Under the render engines, we're using cycles. If you switch to EV, it doesn't work. That's just a light area. Two things you can try if you're going to use EVs: to click on bloom to get a different effect, and screen space reflections to give you a bit more reflection in there. If you're going to use EV, that will improve it a little bit. But I'm using cycles. I'm going to change the angle of the camera now. I'll press N for the N panel and make sure that camera to view is selected. I'm going to hold my mouse wheel down and drag it away from me. Something like that. If I render this now, that sky area will come out as a solid gray. I'm going to fix that by adding a sky texture. Let me turn the other lights off so we can see better what's going on here. Sky texture. I'm going to click on the world properties icon, and beside color, that little colored circle, click that and select sky texture. That's very bright. Go down to the strength and type 0.02. I'd like to bring that sun into the picture. To do that, I'm going to change the size to 3, the elevation to 1.5. Then for the sun rotation, I'm going to click and drag it to the left. Here comes the sun. I'm going to leave it around -40. Let me make that a little brighter. The sun intensity, I'm going to change that to 30. These 3 settings here, air, dust, ozone, control the color and saturation. I'm going to change the air density, set that back to 1, the dust, and the ozone. The altitude is the altitude of the scene at sea level. This is sea level right now. If I change that to 10,000, where the air is much thinner, that sky is going to be darker. Notice these little circles on the right, those are keyframes. You could make a nice animation by keyframing the sun's rotation. Or sunrise. Great fun. And that's it for sky texture. I'd like you to go over to sky texture, click on that, and then click on environment texture. Under open, click open, and open the HDRI that we used in tutorial 4. If you don't have that file, here's what I want you to do. Go to Polyhaven, that's polyhaven.com, click on Browse HDRIs, and then just pick one, folks. It doesn't really matter. We want to show how the HDRI illuminates a scene. I'm going to make my image a little brighter. The HDRI image is now supplying all of the light to the scene. If we look on the heads of the actors, we can see reflections from street lamps. We can see shadows on the ground. That's HDR lighting, folks. If you'd like more detail on how to use an HDRI, refer back to my tutorial number 4. Take a look at this next short video clip. It's going to explain what we'll be doing next. We're going to add God rays for the two spotlights. The lights will automatically track the movement of the singer. We're going to use auto keyframe to move the singer, and we're going to add 2 rows of blinking lights. Go up to shading, and in the bottom left where it says object, that drop-down list we want world. I'm going to hold shift, drag them down, click on the environment texture, press delete, go back up to layout. Turn the lights on for light 3 spot and render and light 3 spot 001 and include those round spheres. Switch to solid view and then press 7 on the numpad for top view. I want to put this lead singer, I'm going to type G for grab, about even with that middle backup singer, about that position. Go to the right to Object Properties and then type I and insert location. We're going to need that keyframe for that lead singer later. I'm going to expand the timeline view. Click on that light at the top. Remember those keyframes we made when we were adjusting the intensity? Press delete. They're both gone. I'm going to type G and then Y to move that up about even with that very top singer. Now I'm going to make adjustments to both lamps, and I don't want to do it twice. Take a look at this light 3 spot object data properties. The data is called light.002. If I click on the next one, that's light.004. Click that drop-down list on the left and select light.002. Now they're both sharing the same data. So whatever changes I make to one will affect them both. That's exactly what I want. I'm going over to Object Properties. I'm going to change that Y coordinate, about 5.2 I think I liked. Good. Back to Camera View. I'm going to press N for the N panel, make sure camera to view is checked. And the view that I want, I'm going to zoom out a little, rotate it a bit, and the data I ended up using for the camera, let me select the camera. X location was 17.7, Y was negative 0.55, Z was 7.75. Rotation for X is good. Y 0. Z 82. That's the camera view that I ended up using. Go to rendered view. Now let me show you something. I'm going to click on that lead singer and just type G, grab it. Look at the lights. They haven't moved. I'm going to right click so I don't move that lead singer. Let me click on light 3 spot to select it. And there's a funny symbol there. That's the constraints. Click on that and click track 2. There's a little eyedropper. Click on that, drag it over and click on the lead singer. Do the same for spot 3.001. Add the constraint, track 2, eyedropper, click on the singer. Now I'm going to click on the singer and type G for grab. The lights follow the singer. How cool is that? Press 7 on the numpad for top view and take a look at the way the shadows are working out for those lights. That's what I wanted. Go back to camera view and now go up at shading and where it says object on the left, select world, click on background, delete that, and then add shader volume scatter. Connect volume to volume and let's turn on rendered mode in the viewport. Now the density, turn that down to 0.05. There we go. Let's go back up to the layout workspace. There's a couple of adjustments I want to make on the lights. So click on a light. I'm light 3 spot, and then the object data properties, that little light bulb. I'm going to increase the power to 10,000. And if I look at the edges of those lights, that's pretty sharp. Let me turn the blend up to 1 to make it softer. And I want a tighter spotlight, so the spot size, I'm going to use 12.2. There, that's what I want. That looks good. Now, all the light in the scene is being scattered. The 2 spotlights, the footlights. Let me show you something. On the right, light 4 area, let me activate that. That was that backlight that we made for the singers. It was an area light, we made it red. But what a mess. I'm going to turn that off, disable the viewport. Now I want to animate the singer. Have him move around the stage with the lights following him. I'm going to press 7 for top view and go to solid view. And remember, we added a keyframe a long time ago, frame 1. I want him moving in this area back and forth. I'm going to click that white circle above the timeline, automatic keyframe insertion. Now that's active. I'm going to go to frame 20, type G, drag him up, and there's a keyframe. Go to frame 40, G, another keyframe, 60, G, grab. That's all we do. Nice and quick and easy. Let's go to camera view and go back to frame 1 and play the animation. Nice. Let me turn on the rendered. Click it now. The lights are following. Singer is singing, having a great time. Before we do anything else, turn off auto keyframe. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to add some blinking lights on the left. Let's go to solid view and then add mesh UV sphere. Type S for scale and then 0.2. Go over to the object properties, the Z location, make that -1. Let's go to top view. Click on that new sphere you added. Type G for grab and put it in line with these singers. I'm going to duplicate this in a minute, but I'm going to add all the properties to it first. Click on the materials, new, and rename it blinking. The surface is going to be emission. Color, I'm going to choose a red. I'm going to make it a little darker, and the strength, I'm going to make it 50. I'm going to go back to frame 1. Let's go to camera view and rendered preview, see what that looks like. So I'm going to duplicate that along here. Go back over to the material properties where the strength is 50. I'm at frame 1 and click that round circle to add a keyframe. Go to frame 30, add a keyframe, advance to frame 31, set the strength to 0. Add a keyframe, go to frame 45, add a keyframe, there. So the timeline says full strength and then off. So box, select them all. Shift D to duplicate, move your mouse to the right, line them up. Those are already selected. Shift D again, move them to the right. Shift D. We're almost done. Shift D. And let's do it once more. Go back to frame 1, and now let's play it and watch that light. On, off, on, off. That's how we make a blinking light. I'm going to go back to solid view, top view, and I'm going to duplicate that light. Shift D, type X, -1. Shift D, X, -1. Shift D, X, -1. One more. DX -1, enter. Camera view, render. Go back to frame 1 and play the animation. There's blinking lights, and we've got 5 of them. Nice job. I'd like to duplicate these 5 lights over on the right to add symmetry to the stage. So click on one. Hold the Shift key down, don't let go. Click on the next one, I'm still holding Shift. Then let go of the Shift key, press Shift D, and type the letter Y. And move them over so they're in view of the camera. You pick a spot you like. I'm going with there, and I'm going to click. At this point, we can render. Let's go to the render properties. We're using cycles, GPU compute, if it's available to you. Output properties, frame rate is 30. I've named mine tutorial 6, file format FFmpeg video. The container under encoding is MPEG 4. When those are set, go up to render and render animation. When you're done, your video will look like this. An IES file shows how a specific light renders in a room. The files come directly from the light manufacturers. Go up to File, New, and then General. Delete the default cube. Now we're going to add a floor. So go to Add, Mesh, Plane, type S, 10, enter. That's the floor. Do it again. Add, Mesh, Plane, type S, 10, enter. That's the wall. The rotations over on the right, Y is 90 and Z is 90. Press 0 for camera view, and then N for the N panel, camera to view, and try and line that up so that the base of the wall is horizontal. Zoom back out a bit. Let's position the light. Click on the light under the collection panel and the location. X is 0, Y is -0.04, and Z is 1. Click on the render properties, change the render engine to cycles, switch to GPU compute, and max samples. For the viewport, I'm going with 100, and for the rendering, 100. Save your work. Go to File, Save. I've already saved mine. I've called it Tutorial 6 IES. Let's add some materials to the floor and the wall. Click on the floor, go to the Materials Properties, New, and Base Color. Click that and drag that luminosity all the way down. I want to paint it black. Click on the wall, and instead of New, just that drop-down list on the left, and use Material 1, so it's black also. That's done. Let's switch to Rendered View. That's our light. That's the default light. Let me show you. Click on the light. That's a point light. We're going to change that to an IES light now. An IES light is a profile that you download from the internet. I want you to open a browser and go to this site. It's called IES Library. It's ieslibrary.com. And the data for these lights is provided by the manufacturers of the lights. These people use Blender and put the light source 5 centimeters from the wall and 1 meter above. That's why we positioned the light earlier the way we did. And look at this, they have over 250,000 entries. So when you're going to browse the library, it could take you a week. Browse the library. And the one that I chose for this example was number 5. I like that one. Click on it. Click on download. And when you download it, you're going to get a very crazy looking file name. Remember where you saved it? You're going to need it soon. Once it's downloaded, we can add that to our light. Now remember, this will only work in cycles. With the light selected, go to Object Data Properties and click Use Nodes. Let's go up to the shading, select the shading workspace, hold Shift, drag that down, click on Emission, press Delete. Go Add, Texture, and there it is, IES Texture. Click External, and then click that file folder to find the file that you just downloaded. I'm going to make this box a little wider so you can see that file name. That's what you just downloaded. Connect Factor to Surface. Let's go back up to Layout, and there's our IES. I'm going to zoom in a bit with my mouse, change the camera view. I'm going to type R for rotate, get it pointing straight down. Couple of settings on the right. Under the strength, change that to 0.02. And under radius, change that to 0. I'm going to adjust my camera view again a little bit to get what I want. And there is an IES light, folks. Save your work. Boy, we sure covered a lot. I talked about the 4 default light types: point, sun, spot, area. I showed you how to do a mesh emission. We added a sky texture, God rays for the spotlights, and IES lights. I explained how to get hard and soft shadows. We used the Cycle Render engine for the first time. Now you know about using render slots to compare rendering. We used the constraint track 2 so the spotlights follow the singer. And we know how to add auto keyframes. That's a lot. Now you know all about lights. If you think that was something, wait till you see what we've got for the next tutorial. I can't wait. You are going to learn the basics of physics by creating a short domino run. Collisions are based on speed, direction, and shape.